Hey guys, Nick from the Three Forks Church of Christ, and we're back for another one of these video devotionals. And I thought today we'd talk about faith. There's a lot, obviously, to say about faith, and faith is a concept that is so woven into the idea of Christianity and the idea of religion and the idea of who we're trying to be and what we're supposed to be doing in life. That it's obviously it sets up a whole discussion of the importance of faith, but it also leads to a whole lot of distortion of the same. In other words, a lot of debate and a lot of arguing between people who proclaim to believe in Jesus has to do with what exactly faith is and what it's not. We could say a lot about that in that category, but what I want to do instead is to see a picture of faith. And maybe exhort you to trying to see something a little bit deeper when it comes to faith. And hopefully that will inspire you maybe to dig a little bit deeper even in your own study. One of the most beautiful chapters on faith in Scripture, of course, is the book of Hebrews chapter 11. And there you can see many times there through the men and the women who lived previous to us, the picture of faith lived out. And Abraham, Sarah, even Rahab is mentioned later, though she's not mentioned. Spent a lot of time on there, but Moses and Noah and all these figures from the past, and we constantly see that they did things and they did amazing things sometimes and spectacular things, but it was all attributed to the idea of faith. In other words, they believed in God so much that they were willing to stand on that belief, even when everything else seemed to be going a different direction. So Hebrews 11 certainly would be a wonderful place to turn, but I'm actually going to encourage you to turn with me to the book of Matthew and chapter 14. And I'm going to put it up here on the screen just in case you don't have a Bible handy there, but Matthew chapter 14. And to put this in some context, right previous to this this text here, that we're going to start in verse 22 here, Jesus had just fed this multitude, this 5,000 men in size, and done this spectacular thing with taking this little boy's lunch and feeding this huge crowd. And then and we take in and put John 6 next to this. We get a few other details on what happens here. But basically what happens is Jesus sends his disciples in a boat to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And the text tells us in verse 23 that he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. So he's not with them, but he sends them out onto the sea. Let's read a little bit of this text together. Verse 22, it says, "Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitude away. And when he had sent the multitude away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And now when evening came, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, 'It's a ghost.' And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, 'Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid.'" Now, this is a spectacular scene, and I can only imagine what it would have had to have been in person. Peter and James and John and Andrew, we know at least, were very familiar with the sea, for they were fishermen in this very region when Jesus called them. Whether the other disciples were accustomed to being in boats on the water, we don't know, but they were on this boat, and they were being tossed by the waves, and everything's crashing around them, and it's nighttime, and the storms are brewing, and all of a sudden they look out onto the water, and they see this figure walking towards them, and they don't recognize Jesus at first, and, well, the mind, sometimes does crazy things when we see odd things out of place, and they think it's a ghost. And Jesus cries out to them, or calls out to them rather, "Be of good cheer." I love that line. In the midst of all their torment, in the midst of all this craziness, he says, "Be of good cheer." Well, why? Because it's I, he said. Do not be afraid. It's Jesus, and there's no reason to be afraid. Verse 28, though, that's where I want us to focus in as we see this story unfold and talk about faith from a little bit different perspective maybe, and hopefully encourage you to dig a little bit deeper when we talk about what does it really mean to have faith in God. In verse 28 it says, "And Peter answered him, said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. So he said, Come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him, and said to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, Truly, you are the Son of God." Now, there's a lot going on in this text that we could talk about, but I said we want to talk about faith just for a few minutes. And I've come to this text, and I know I've preached this text, and I've heard it preached many times, and usually the route that is taken with this is something like, at least Peter had the faith enough to step out of the boat. You know, all the other disciples, they just stayed in the boat. And that is true. That's absolutely true, and that's something that we can make note of here, but there's something a little bit deeper. And I want you to go back and look at verse 28 here with me. And it says, "And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Peter understood something that we need to not only see, but we need to, we need to give good thought to. He understood that if Jesus commanded him to do something, that he could do it. This isn't about him believing hard enough that he could walk on the water, or that he could, break the laws of gravity, or break the laws of science. This was him believing so much in Jesus that if Jesus said that he could do something, that he could do it. And that's why Peter cries out. He says, Lord, if I have enough faith, can I walk on the water? No, he doesn't say that. He doesn't ask that. He says, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And Jesus said, Come. And as long as Peter was focused on Jesus saying, Come, he was walking on the water. I don't know how far he went. I don't know how quickly he went. But it mentions that he saw the wind. It was boisterous. Obviously, if the wind was boisterous, the waves were crashing too. In other words, he took his eyes off of Jesus. He for a moment forgot again that Jesus had commanded him to do something. And now, all of a sudden, his faith, his trust is that, wind and water causes danger and that I'm going to sink. And that's exactly what happens. He begins to sink. And that brings up this, he cries out for the Lord saves him, he reaches down, pulls him out, and then he says, Oh, you of little faith. And sometimes when I come to this, especially in the past, I've been, wow. I mean, he had such faith that he stepped out of the boat, and then he turns around and says, Oh, you of little faith. I don't think he was talking about the quality of his faith. Actually, I believe that his quality of his faith can be commended here. He believed so much that if Jesus said do something, that he could do it. So much so that he stepped out of a boat to try to walk on water. And did it. No, it's that it only lasted a short time. The little part, I think, there in the context is not that he didn't believe hard enough. It's that he allowed his faith to be pushed to the side, and it only lasted a short piece. I think there's a lot to be said in this context, and a lot that can be said to us, but what I really encourage you, and I want to exhort you to do, is remember not only that faith is believing in God, it is on the surface, but a lot of people believed in God, at least for a time. A lot of people believed in God. Matter of fact, there's a whole crowd, we'll talk about that maybe next time, that follow Jesus, believing that he's the Son of God, or at least that he is the prophet to come into the world, who will quickly walk away from him when he's not offering them what they want. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people do that today because their belief is shallow. Here, Peter encourages us to look deeper. What is it that we have our trust and faith in? Peter believed that if God asked him to do something, that he could do it. And God has asked us to do a lot of things. A lot of things sometimes that are contrary to the world in which we live. He's asked us to live faithful. He's asked us to put our trust in him. He's asked us to stand up in times where we might want to sit down. And faith says, if God has commanded us, we can do it. We can see the blessing on the other side. We may not walk on water, but we have the opportunity to see what God can do in our life as well. I hope that you find these little devotionals encouraging, and I hope that you'll tune in. We try to put a new one up every Tuesday and Thursday, and I think I mentioned this last time that you can see these on our website at threeforkscfc.org, and you can check out our web page or a page on Facebook, Facebook/3forkscofc, and those are right in front of you. And would love to have you like that page. And if you like that page, you can keep up with these as they're published. But look for these every Tuesday and Thursday. And of course, love to have your comments. Feel free to reach out to us. Maybe there's a subject you want us to cover in this. That'd be great too. But until next time, I hope that you have a great and I hope that you have a blessed day.